You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So you've heard it discussed. You've heard it debated. Across the nation, it's the question taking everybody by storm. Who has the best rivalry game? What is the best rivalry in college football? And obviously, we are going to be biased towards the Red River Rivalry. There's nothing like it. There's nothing that comes close to the 50-50 split inside the Cotton Bowl with 90,000 inside the stadium, several 100,000 more outside the stadium. The whole weekend, just everybody kind of a little bit on edge going down to Deep Ellum. You only go downtown if your team won because you don't want to necessarily hear from the other team if you lost. So it's a fascinating discussion. And I think as the SEC gets to know Oklahoma and Texas and they take part in the Red River Rivalry with a little bit more ownership of it, I think they'll truly come to appreciate it, Jay. And obviously I'm going to put it up there. I want to put it right at the top. That to me is the best rivalry game. What did our folks over at On3 have to say about that though?
So yeah, On3 dropped a graphic and they asked the question of best rivalry. And of course they've got the standard ones out there. Well, they got the standard 4 and one that I still try to figure out if it's really a rivalry. I mean, you've got the big game, Michigan, Ohio State. You've got the Iron Bowl with Alabama and Auburn, OU, Texas. You got Florida State and Miami. And then you have USC and Notre Dame. Now, I know that they play for like something, right? I'm going to purposely butcher this. I'm not even going to say it because they play for a thing. But it just doesn't feel like it's one of those rivalries that's truly hated, right? Like if to me you could throw Texas A&M in there as a replacement, you could throw Oklahoma State, possibly. You could throw Georgia and Florida in there, right? The world's largest outdoor cocktail party, which is not called that anymore, but it's called that in our hearts. That's probably another one you could. But of course, biases, aside, definitely has to be Red River up there. To me, out of respect for everybody else's, because we know how big these rivalry games are. I mean, heck, you can even talk about like the Holy War, which that's now coming back between Utah and BYU. But your Holy Grail truly out of this is going to be Michigan, the big game, Iron Bowl, and Red River. That's really the three that, to me, are the only ones in college football that actually fight for the top spot. And it's one of those that you can make interchangeable. And it's one of those, to me, that no matter how you slice it, you're not wrong if you pick one of those three as your top one, because all three of them are so electric. But of course, our bias here, for me on OU Texas, is just as you said, man, that split is just different. And then going there to the fair, like when I was chatting with Josh Pate about it at Media Days, right? Good old name drop in here. I was like, I'm so glad you came and was able to see it. He's like, man, I've been 3 times. He's like, every experience is like the best. He's like, I just need Oklahoma and Texas to both be good and lined up. That way I can easily make it back. He's like, I would go every year if I could, right? It's one of those games that is, it blows your mind. And even the players will tell you that they hear about it, they don't believe it, they experience it, and they're like, yeah, it was everything and more. So that one probably to me is the one that really resonates the most. And I think with like the big game and the Iron Bowl, the passion behind the game helps, but it's so different because you're in way more hostile territory when you're on the road, because you're on a road game with a school that like they really hate you. Like they that passion, they hate you. So it's not the same where you have to, it's like a divide. I think the divide really, of course, makes OU Texas just jump out against everybody else.
Yeah, there are so many really, really good rivalries in the sport, and it's part of what makes the sport so great. I think you could even throw in the Army-Navy game, the uniqueness there, getting their own kind of Saturday to really, promote that rivalry is pretty special. Now, those teams aren't in the national consciousness of college football. Like they're not, competing and contending for national titles, but it's still, I think, a game that resonates with a lot of college football fans, especially the college football purists. The Civil War between Oregon State, That's underrated, and it's one that takes a little bit of the sting out of it with the Pac-12 demise, but they're continuing to find a way to make it go on. Like, they're not slowing down. They've made it work to where they can continue to play that game. Oklahoma State. And I mean, I think you could throw Oklahoma, Nebraska in there too, as one of the better rivalries in sports. Again, they haven't gotten to play as much in recent years, so the shine is a little bit off on that. But for decades, that might have been one of the biggest rivalries in sports because the teams were at the top of the college football pyramid for so long. The 60s, 70s, 80s, it was Oklahoma and Nebraska just battling out all the time for the Big 8 title, for national titles. It was huge. And for, the college football fans that are like our dad's age, like that's one of the premier matchups in the entire sport. So, it maybe hits a little bit different for younger fans because they haven't gotten to see as much Oklahoma and Nebraska going for national titles at the same time. Mm-hmm. But it's a game that means a lot and it matters a lot. But it's fun to kind of debate this because I think there are so many really fun and fascinating games every single offseason or every single year, not offseason, but every single season. Even the Iron Bowl where, okay, Auburn might be just kind of this middle of the road team. They're an average team. They still give Alabama fits every single time. And to me, that's the true definition of a rivalry is, I mean, you literally throw the records out the window. You throw the stats out the window. It doesn't matter what you've done to that point. It's a whole different ball game when it comes to the Iron Bowl. And so, yeah, I can understand the SEC argument for the Iron Bowl being number one, but as far as the game itself, nothing is better than the Red River Showdown, the Red River Shootout, the Red River Rivalry, OU Texas, whatever you want to call it. Nothing better than that.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against it. Like, I can't argue against you when it comes to it because it's just that big of a game, right? It's that one, and it's funny because it's really, when it comes to the rivalry where just about anything can happen, it really is OU Texas and then Iron Bowl, right? Both of those have a tendency of the inferior team winning very often. Like, you don't see that much in the big game, right? It's more of both of the top teams and they win because they're going to win. Like, if one team is bad and the other one's good, the bad team's going to get blown out. It never fails. It's not one of those where they sneak in and win the game. It's always no, you suck. It's going to be a blowout. Whereas with OU Texas and the Iron Bowl, one team can have one win all season and they'll find a way to be up for that game and somehow win. It's like you can never overlook them. Right. And with Michigan, Ohio State, the helpful thing for them on overlooking is that it's rare that both of them are just down bad. Right. Michigan's been okay, the 21st century, and Ohio State's been superior. They've rattled off a whole bunch of wins, but at the same time, Michigan wasn't just awful. They were okay. But it's such a rarity, especially modernly, seeing those two not being at the middle to top of their conference or being like one of them being super mediocre compared to the other. So I think that kind of also helps. That adds to the components of what the rivalry is like. It's if one team is bad and the other one's good, does the bad team actually matter in this game? And with Iron Bowl and Red River, it feels like they always have a shot, no matter what.
Yeah, I think back to the kind of that run in between 2016 through 2019 when, I mean, the Kyler Murray year, like Kyler Murray was like dang near unstoppable and Texas found a way to win that game. Now Kyler Murray got it back in the Big 12 championship game, but I mean, it's just those years, the games were just so tight. And even this past year, I mean, Texas was supposed to blow out Oklahoma. Oklahoma wasn't supposed to really be much of anything, and Oklahoma was able to get the win. So,
yeah.
And they're going to do it again this year. I'll say it again. Oklahoma's going to beat Texas again this year. and send the Longhorns crying with their second loss of the season. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. Also, go check out the Locked On Sooners Insider Program, where you will get special content. You can have Q&As with me and Jay. You can interact with us at any time by sending SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711 to get 25% off your first month. Again, that's text SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711 to join the Locked On Sooners Insider Program. Follow Jay on Twitter at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Also subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. If you get your podcast on Apple, it would really help us if you gave us a 5-star review, because it helps other people find out about the show. And I know you want to help your friends, your family find out about the show. Talk to somebody that went to church with, and he was in visiting. He's like, I know you. I watch your show every day. I'm like, hey, that's awesome. Thank you. So nice. Shout out to all the everydayers out there that are making Locked On Sooners their first listen every single day. Also, go check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Again, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll catch you next time. Boomer Sooner.